major breaking news right here tonight. We are here in Sacramento amid a supercharged showdown between the Trump administration and California authorities, state and local. We have breaking news tonight as Attorney General Jeff Sessions comes to town and launches a brand new lawsuit late tonight aimed at California defiance. It's a state that's making it that much tougher for federal immigration agents to do their jobs. And back in Washington, we are following a major shakeup in the president's economic team. And Wall Street already reacting tonight negatively in contrast to what we're hearing from Main Street. Praise for the president's tough stand on tariffs. We have got team coverage for you tonight. Trace Gallagher with the very latest on this late-breaking showdown between the Trump administration and California. But we start with Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry with what he's learning about the departure of White House economic advisor Gary Cohn.
Well, Shannon, great to see you out there. Breaking tonight, there are already names being floated to replace Gary Cohn at the White House, from conservative supply-side economist Larry Kudlow to trade advisor Peter Navarro. Remember, he beat out Cohn on the tariffs issue in recent days, while the president today was correct when he said there's turnover in every single White House. There's been a particularly large number of departures lately, from Hope Hicks to Rob Porter, multiple press secretaries, communications directors, national security advisors, and yes, chiefs of staff. What's significant about Cohn, he was a key architect of the tax cut, plus the regulatory reform that has propelled the economy. And with the markets getting a lot more volatile in recent weeks, there's no denying this is a big loss for the president. While he lost a high-profile battle, Cohn, to try and stop the president from moving forward on those steel and aluminum tariffs, White House officials tonight are insisting Cohn is not running out just because of one dispute. But in fact, it was 2 months ago today the president boasted he wanted Cohn to stick around for a, quote, long time. Tonight, Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia, was on with Martha, saying this was a big battle within the White House. But in the end, he believes the president is right on these tariffs. Watch.
Let me speak about the president's movement on tariffs. I support 1,000%. We're talking about fair trade. Everybody in America is for fair trade. This free trade hasn't worked out well for America or American jobs.
There is no doubt this is going to feed the mainstream media narrative. It's already been out there. The president denies it, that there's chaos at the White House. But as the president himself noted today, he likes conflict. He likes different points of view in the room, whether it's trade or other issues. Diversity of thought is something that's supposed to be a virtue, obviously. But right now he's facing a lot of criticism. It was his former chief of staff, Reince Priebus, who said over the weekend, critics may pounce on this meandering process, on decision-making, all of the departures, staff moves, but the focus should be on the results that the president is getting, Shannon.
All right, Ed Henry live for us in Washington. Thank you very much, Ed. And this is a Fox News alert. The Department of Justice tonight launching a major lawsuit against the state of California, alleging deliberate interference with federal immigration policies. The DOJ is seeking an injunction to immediately block enforcement of 3 controversial new state laws here. And the lawsuit's already sparking angry responses from prominent Californians tonight. Trace Gallagher joins us now with details. Hi, Trace.
California has certainly been building for a while, but it appears the last straw may have come 10 days ago when Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf warned residents in the San Francisco Bay Area about imminent operations being conducted by Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. The DOJ now says California has repeatedly interfered in the federal government's plans to enforce immigration law. So the Trump administration is asking a judge to immediately block 3 California laws enacted within the past year. First, a law preventing state companies from cooperating with ICE when it comes to accessing workplaces or employee records. In other words, the state wants private companies to shield illegal immigrants from federal agents. Secondly, the DOJ wants to end California's controversial sanctuary state policy, which places limits on who local police can hold, question, or transfer into federal custody. Remember, this is the policy that ended up allowing a 5-time deported illegal immigrant to get out of jail, get a gun, and kill Kate Steinle. Finally, the DOJ says it's unconstitutional for California to be allowed to inspect immigration detention facilities run by the Department of Homeland Security. Attorney General Jeff Sessions will be in Sacramento, as you noted, tomorrow to make a major announcement on sanctuary cities. In the meantime, the AG says, quoting, the DOJ and the Trump administration are going to fight these unjust, unfair, and unconstitutional policies. We are fighting to make your job safer and to help you reduce crime in America. The Attorney General's trip west comes at the end of a tense week with President Trump. The president is frustrated with Sessions for recusing himself from the Russia meddling investigation. But aside from a few friendly jokes Mr. Trump made about Jeff Sessions at the media dinner on Saturday night, the feud appears to be calming down. Though in his response to the DOJ lawsuit, California Governor Jerry Brown wrote, quoting, at a time of unprecedented political turmoil, Jeff Sessions has come to California to further divide and polarize America. Jeff, these political stunts may be the norm in Washington, but they don't work here. Sad. And California Attorney General Xavier Becerra said this about the lawsuit, quote, we've seen this B-rated movie before, so we're not totally surprised. Nothing really new here. We're prepared to deal with this. And finally, because of California's sanctuary law, the Trump administration withheld $1 million in grant money. Now, a judge has ruled the money does not have to be paid, at least until litigation is settled. So you can call it a temporary victory for the Trump administration. Shannon.
All right, Trace Gallagher, thank you very much for reacting now to this late-breaking move tonight by the Trump administration, cracking down on California as a sanctuary state. That's the best way to put it. Let's bring in Harmeet Dillon, an RNC committee woman here in California. She is also a civil rights attorney who regularly argues before the Ninth Circuit, and Nevada Republican Attorney General Adam Laxalt, who has been challenging California's sanctuary city policies and state policies from across the state line. Welcome to you both.
Happy to be here, Shannon.
All right. I want to start by reading a little bit from the lawsuit, Harmeet. I know you've had a chance to look at it. General, I don't know if you have as well, but it says this. The United States has undoubted, preeminent authority to regulate immigration matters. This authority derives from the United States Constitution and numerous acts of Congress. California has no authority to enforce laws that obstruct or otherwise conflict with or discriminate against federal immigration enforcement efforts. Harmeet, essentially this goes after 3 state laws that the feds say California is actively trying to stop them from doing immigration enforcement.
That's right. And as you mentioned, Shannon, the law points out that their supremacy clause of the United States Constitution requires that the federal government has the exclusive authority over immigration laws in our country. So California's got 3 laws that were passed last year, each of which is designed to obstruct, in one case, lawful employers. In the second case, the operation of the federal government with regard to detention of aliens. And in the third case, law enforcement is actively barred from cooperating with the federal government to give names of people who are about to be released, et cetera. So each of these is a direct threat in your face to the United States government. And as you can see from the angry reaction from Jerry Brown and Xavier Becerra, they're not happy with being confronted with this. And so, but to me, as a legal issue, it's pretty simple. It's just like any other federal law. If a state doesn't like it, the state doesn't get to overrule the federal government. It's the other way around in our scheme. And the last time we had states trying to go off on their own and ignore federal law, we had a civil war in this country. So this is a dangerous time, and it is time. I'm glad to see the Attorney General stepping up.
Yeah, it is a pretty bold move tonight. General, I know that you have been fighting because you say what happens in California actually impacts your state as well. And when they have certain policies that flows over across the border to you, you've been at this legal fight a while.
Absolutely. We've been in litigation for over a year. We originally supported the DOJ when they were trying to make sure they had the authority to withhold these grants. But let's talk about what's really going on here. These are very dangerous policies. This is common sense that our law enforcement locally needs to work with the federal authorities to get dangerous felons off the streets and to get them out of our communities. And so, of course, in Nevada, for your national audience may not know, we're a 3-hour drive in both major cities to Reno and Las Vegas. If they're not working with federal authorities to get violent felons off the street and deported, they're easily able to drive over the border and end up here in Nevada. And here, all 17 sheriffs and myself as the top law enforcement officer, we've been fighting against this. We were able to push back this last session when the Democrat legislative session tried to push this forward. And fortunately, we spoke in one voice and were able to convince our lawmakers that this is simply makes no sense and endangers our citizens.
Okay, now the judge, the federal judge at the district level, the very first level, who's been handling many of these cases, Judge Orrick, last fall he ruled against the administration when President Trump issued an executive order essentially going after sanctuary cities. He said this, he said the Constitution vests the spending powers in Congress, not the president. So the executive order cannot constitutionally place new conditions on federal funds. Went on to say federal funding that bears no meaningful relationship to immigration enforcement cannot be threatened merely because a jurisdiction and immigration enforcement strategy of which the president disapproves. Now, Harmeet, there are many different cases now kind of joined together and related being handled by this judge. He's had a couple of different rulings, but essentially so far what he said on the merits is the feds can't do a lot of what they're doing or trying to do with respect to defanging sanctuary cities and defunding them.
Right. Well, so this was an executive order passed by the president in the salad days of the administration in the first few days. Mm-hmm. The Attorney General of the United States then came out with a statement that sort of tried to cut back or define what the executive order covered. And that's what the judge ruled on today. The same judge ruled on, this Judge Orrick ruled today, that actually when you look at only cutting back or holding back grants that have to do with law enforcement, which is a much lower amount than all federal funding, that is not necessarily a bad thing at this stage in the litigation. So he's asking the government to come forward and prove that there's a legitimate tie between law enforcement and the enforcement of immigration laws. That seems obvious to you and me and the Attorney General from Nevada, obviously, but for our law enforcement in California, the rhetoric that you hear them using, like the Attorney General here did today, is, oh, we're tearing families apart. Well, if you're a family with a criminal who's done drug trafficking, pimping of children, armed violence, DUI, et cetera, those people go to jail too in America. And so shielding them is actually putting illegal immigrants at a much higher level of protection than the rest of the society. It makes no sense.
Well, this case will have to wind its way through many hurdles, including the Ninth Circuit, maybe eventually at the Supreme Court. Harmeet, General Laxalt, I know that you will both be watching as this journey continues, and it may take a couple of years. Thank you both.
Thank you, Shannon.
Absolutely.
All right, please tune in tomorrow night to hear from the Attorney General himself, Jeff Sessions, about this new lawsuit and much more. We've got a lot to discuss with him. It is a Fox News at Night exclusive interview tomorrow. Well, tonight, House Judiciary Committee Chair Bob Goodlatte and House Oversight Chair Trey Gowdy have sent a letter to the Attorney General and Deputy Attorney General. They're calling for a second special counsel. They want a new investigation to look into the investigators' potential conflicts of interest and decisions, quote, made and not made by current and former Justice Department officials. Now, this marks a change of course for Gowdy, who's previously said he really wasn't, sure about this idea, and other Republicans pushing efforts to launch a second special counsel. So let's talk about it with Fox News politics editor and the editor of the Halftime Report, Chris Stirewalt, holding it down in D.C. It's been a busy day there, Chris.
Yeah, you leave town for one day and everything just goes all crazy.
What happens?
Exactly.
Yeah, so we talk about the fact that Congressman Gowdy, the chairman of House Oversight, has not really been big on this idea that's been pushed a lot. But here's what he said on Special Report tonight about why he's come to this decision.
What changed for me was the knowledge that there are 24 witnesses that Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General, would not have access to. So your options are DOJ investigated themselves. They can't do that because of conflict of interest. Let the Inspector General do it. Now, I'm a big fan of Mike Horowitz, but he has no jurisdiction over witnesses. So when I counted up 24 witnesses that he would not be able to access were he to investigate it, yeah, only one conclusion, that's special counsel.
Yeah, it's a big
deal.
All
right, so I will ask the Attorney General, Chris, tomorrow about this. But what do you think he does?
Look, this is significant because, as you alluded to, this is not the kook caucus coming back again for the 20th special prosecutor or anything else. Trey Gowdy is a serious guy. Goodlatte is a serious guy. Their words have weight with the Speaker of the House. They're also probably going to have some weight with Jeff Sessions, because the deal here is this is about how the warrant process is managed. And Gowdy makes no secret of the fact that what he's seen in his capacity shows him that the process was abused. So he's saying this is going to put serious weight behind this, because now this has moved into sort of the adults table.
Okay, so the ranking Democrat on House Intelligence says this, because Adam Schiff says, listen, the president publicly said, I don't like what the attorney general's decided to do in looking into some of these things. He's using the inspector general. Why doesn't he do something else? Well, Adam Schiff says, okay, now Republicans are pressuring for that. He says House Republicans now call for the appointment of a special counsel to investigate, quote, FISA abuse, unquote. In doing so, Republicans express their interest in investigating everything but what is most important: Russia's interference in our election, the Trump campaign's role, and what we need to do to protect the nation in the future. What say you?
Well, Adam Schiff says a lot of things. But in this case, I would say there's nothing that is against Mueller in this. There's nothing that is going against Robert Mueller or the existing special counsel's investigation. That prosecution continues apace. It is possible for a government to walk and chew gum at the same time, though sometimes they fall on their face. Look, special counsels, you know it, can be very dangerous. They can go on for years. Bad things can happen, unintended consequences, all of that razzmatazz. That's why they did away with the previous special prosecutor law. But in this case, look, if Gowdy says that what he's seen makes him want this to happen, then he is going to be a hard man to deny on this case, because he has a lot of credibility.
And quickly, the president doubling down on tariffs today, saying they're not going away. Did that cost him, that particular movement, or refusal to move away from that position? Is that what caused Gary Cohn to resign?
Well, I think we are seeing not that slow motion of a remaking of the Trump White House. We saw for a period of time starting in the fall, coming into now the early spring, where it was the John Kelly era. Things were going to be normal. Things were going to be stable. It was going to be predictable. You get the tax cut and yay, yay, yay. And everybody in Washington says, great. I think we, starting with the moment of the firing over the guy who was accused of beating his ex-wife, you start with that moment, and you start to see this spooling forward at a pretty fast pace. I'm not saying Steve Bannon's coming back to the White House, but I am saying it's lit now.
It's lit.
It is.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Chris Darwell, as long as you're not lit during the show.
That's the key.
Good to see you, my friend.
Okay, bye.
All right, well, porn actress Stormy Daniels suing President Trump tonight over their alleged intimate relationship. The lawsuit claims a non-disclosure agreement is not valid because while Daniels and the president's personal attorney signed it, they say Mr. Trump never did. Now, her attorney tweeted out earlier today, we filed this complaint seeking a court order voiding the alleged agreements between our clients, Clifford, a.k.a. Stormy Daniels, and Donald Trump. We'll keep you up to date on that suit as well. Well, North Korean missiles are of particular concern out here in California, right here on the West Coast. Tonight, North Korea is either easing back from the brink or trying to drive a wedge between Washington and a key ally. Which is it? We will talk to California Democrat John Garamendi. And it's undoubtedly a beautiful state here, but all is far from golden in the golden. Hello and welcome back to Fox News at Night, live tonight from Sacramento. Well, nukes in exchange for power. A new deal could be on the table for denuclearizing the Korean Peninsula, this time coming from North Korea. Kim Jong-un apparently left the ball in America's court yesterday after meeting with a South Korean delegation to discuss terms. The deal could spell the beginning of negotiations with North Korea, but it's going to come with a whole lot of strings attached. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts has more. John?
Shannon, good evening. The White House says that South Korean officials will be coming here to Washington later on this week to brief the White House on the offer from North Korea to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, get rid of their nuclear program in exchange for assurances from the United States that it will not seek to overthrow the regime of Kim Jong-un.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
President Trump is not ready to call it a breakthrough, but he is optimistic that the offer from North Korea on talks to end its nuclear program may bear fruit.
I think that they are sincere.
In a joint appearance with Swedish Prime Minister Stefan Löfven, President Trump made a joke when asked what brought North Korea to this point.
Me? No, I think that nobody got that.
The president did take credit for the harsh sanctions that he says helped bring North Korea around. He also said the U.S. helped make the recent South Korean Olympics a success and had praise for North Korea's participation.
I thought North Korea was terrific. They came out, they went into the Olympics, they went in with good spirit, they did well. Let's see if we can carry it over. We may carry it over, it may not. Very It's a very tenuous situation. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens.
President Trump said several times, we'll see what happens with North Korea. Former UN Ambassador John Bolton believes the promise of talks could be just a ruse by the North to buy time.
The only thing North Korea is serious about is getting deliverable nuclear weapons, and by all accounts, they are very close to achieving an objective they've been after for 25 years. So why do they want to talk now? To divert our attention, to get us enmeshed yet again in negotiations, to get across that finish line.
At the press conference this afternoon, President Trump again downplayed the effect of any Russian meddling in the 2016 U.S. election, saying he believes that the Russians did interfere, as well as other players, but that it did not have any effect on the outcome of the election. Shannon?
Thank you very much, John. While some are praising North Korea's overtures over nukes, others are warning the Hermit Kingdom may have sinister motives. John Garamendi is a Democratic congressman from California and member of the House Armed Services Committee. And, sir, usually you're here and I'm there, but tonight we switch roles. It's great to have you with us tonight.
It's all good. Good to be with you. And, yes, I'd like to be in California right now because we're in the midst of a snowstorm in Washington, D.C. But here we are. Well, very interesting what's happening here with the North Korea situation.
It is.
And I think very, very positive. It gives us an opportunity.
Let's talk about what the president had to say today, because the president, there are a lot of skeptics out there, but the president seems to think there is some room possibly here to negotiate. Here's what he said today, and then we'll get your reaction.
Sure.
I think that they are sincere, but I think they're sincere also because the sanctions and what we're doing with respect to North Korea, including, the great help that we've been given from China. And they do more, but I think they've done more than certainly they've ever done for our country before. So China has been a big help.
So what do you think, Congressman? Are they sincere? What do you think the angle is here?
I think it's very, very important that we find out. I think it's very important that these negotiations go forward. I think we ought to pursue what appears to be something of an offer, that is a denuclearization. What's the quo on the quid? Remains to be seen. Is it acceptable? We don't know what that is. But we do know that we're faced with two paths. One is a war on the Korean Peninsula to take away their nuclear weapons and to stop it. That is a very, very bad path. The other path is negotiations, and I'm very pleased that those are taking place. The idea that North Korea wants to have some sort of a guarantee of its future is understandable from their point of view. From South Korea's point of view, the notion of unification of the peninsula doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, and I think in the situation, the notion that South Korea would somehow unify the North isn't going to happen anytime soon. Maybe several decades from now, that's a possibility. So let's pursue this. Let's see how far we can go. And for the president, the statement that he just made was very measured. I'm pleased to hear that. That's important. And I'd recommend, tweet softly, and we do have a very big stick.
Okay, well, to that point, I want to play something that comes to us from New York Times reporter David Sanger speaking on CNN. Here's what he says about how we got here.
And I think President Trump deserves enormous credit for ratcheting up that pressure and making sure that the sanctions were real. There was no reason that the Obama administration couldn't have done that, and they didn't.
So what do you make of that, Congressman? Do you give the president credit for getting them to this point?
I think there's a great deal of credit to go around to a lot of folks, and the president actually said so. He said China's played in this, other countries have, certainly South Korea, and the United States leading on the sanctions. All of that is true. All of it seems to have brought us to this point where North Korea wants to chat. Also need to recognize that South Korea has made a major step forward, actually a step that really didn't have the approval of the United States. The president of South Korea, Mr. Moon, took a very serious political risk to step out and invite to the Olympics and to sit down at the Olympics and now in North Korea with the North Koreans. That was a very courageous and politically risky thing for him to do. So let's give credit all the way around here. We're on I think, a very, very important moment. Hopefully it will come to an agreement in which the North Koreans will give up their nuclear arsenal and their intercontinental ballistic missiles, and we can move to some reduction in the risk that the Korean Peninsula has placed in the world for the last 60 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is tentative skepticism and optimism from many quarters, so we will wait and watch. Congressman Garamendi, great to see you. Hello from your home state. We'll see you back here again soon.
I'm looking forward to
sir.
returning. Thank you.
All right, stick around for results from the official launch of 2018 primary season. Yeah, it's already started. 18 midterm election season officially kicked off today, in Texas, with polls open for voters to cast primary ballots for all 36 of the Lone Star State's congressional districts for governor and for Ted Cruz's Senate seat. Ellison Barber is monitoring all the latest and has the details. Hey, Ellison.
Hi, Shannon. One of the first races called tonight was that Senate race in November. It'll be incumbent Senator Ted Cruz versus Democrat Congressman Beto O'Rourke. What matters tonight to most in the D.C. political world is overall voter turnout. This is the first primary of 2018. It's a big deal simply because it's real people voting for real candidates, and it's not a special election or anything like that. It's officially the start of midterms. Based on the information we have so far, Democrats are showing up in record numbers. Early voting favored Democrats. When you compare 2014 to early voting this time, Democrats beat their own numbers by a lot. They more than doubled it. According to Politico, in Texas's 15 largest counties, more Democrats voted early than they did in the 2016 presidential primary election. For Republicans, the opposite is true.
It's an indication of which side has the energy and the enthusiasm. And that's critical in a midterm election because people tend not to vote in midterms. There's been a lot of talk about how Democrats have increased their turnout rate and participation in these primaries, and that's true. It's also true that for the first time in a long time, Democrats have candidates in almost all the positions for almost all of the congressional seats and statewide offices. But simply putting up a candidate doesn't really do that much for you. It has to come from the bottom up. It has to be grassroots.
Many say the 7th congressional district is a place where Democrats could turn a red seat blue, even though Republicans have held the seat since the mid-1960s.
Texas is not as Republican as it once was, and it showed that even in 2016 when Trump won by 9 points instead of the usual Republican margin of 12 to 15.
But Democrats in Washington seem to worry about losing whatever voter enthusiasm they have in that district if a more progressive candidate won. The official campaign arm for Democrats in the House attacked Democratic candidate Laura Moser. They released opposition research on her and wrote in part, Democratic voters need to hear that Laura Moser is not going to change Washington. She is a Washington insider who begrudgingly moved to Houston to run for Congress. That race hasn't been called yet, but right now Moser is in second among Democrats. Democrats need to turn 24 seats if they want to take control of the House. The final elections are still a long ways away, while a lot of analysts are looking for clues tonight. Of course, nothing is set in stone. Shannon?
All right, hard to believe we're already there. Ellison, thank you very much. While we visit here in the Golden State, it is hard to ignore some of the troubling reports seen daily that span all along the West Coast. For example, reports out today that there were a record number of car break-ins last year in the Bay Area. We thought we'd tell you about some of the state's problems, even epidemics, ripped straight from the headlines. It is just the latest headline to sting the left coast. The worst television ratings ever for the 90th Academy Awards amid a deluge of anti-government politics. Hard on the heels, the Los Angeles Times asking how a place with 58,000 homeless people can continue to function. And an NBC investigative report surveying 153 blocks of downtown San Francisco in search of garbage, needles, and feces. The investigation revealing trash littered across every block.
1/8 of our homeless population, we know this from the surveys, they come here from elsewhere. This is actually a federal issue that Californians are having to deal with.
Also flying in the face of conventional wisdom that it's the jewel of the best coast comes a U.S. News and World Report survey that says the Golden State has the worst quality of life in the nation. Oh, and it's 46th in opportunity. New outrages seem to come every day. An illegal immigrant walking away not guilty in a San Francisco courtroom despite admitting to killing 32-year-old Kate Steinle.
This was an accidental occurrence.
Another illegal immigrant bragging about how he killed 2 Sacramento cops in front of a packed courtroom and calling them cowards.
My priority is to keep this community safe.
The mayor of Oakland tipping off illegal immigrants about pending federal ICE raids. She wasn't sorry she did. Even the state's vaunted tech sector has hardly been immune to the negative headlines. Take STEM Express, once a high-flying biotech. The CEO allegedly caught on tape matter-of-factly negotiating prices for parts of aborted fetuses. Google facing discrimination lawsuits. Congress grilling Facebook, Google, and Twitter over Russian meddling, while the social media giants are standing accused of working with progressive groups to censor conservative content. And from a political culture that claims to value inclusivity, diversity, and gender equality, a slew of sexual harassment scandals rocking Sacramento, which is firmly in Democratic hands. Pamela Lopez, for example, said she was followed into the bathroom by a California lawmaker who undid his pants and asked her to touch his genitals.
I remember thinking, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? And I thought, make it very clear that I do not want to be here.
California Democratic Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia, after carving out a name for being a champion of the Me Too movement, including a Time magazine cover, is now taking an unpaid leave of absence after facing multiple allegations of sexual harassment, including claims she fired a male worker for refusing to play spin the bottle with her. Well, as we've been reporting, breaking news here tonight in California's capital, Sacramento. Amid California's defiance on ICE raids in sanctuary cities, the Trump administration notching up its ongoing battle with a new lawsuit on illegal immigration, among other things. We'll have fresh reaction from a state lawmaker running for governor next. And we'll check out what's happening in the local restaurant scene. Check it out. Reeling from minimum wage hikes, they're hiring, but not humans. We'll be back with more on that and much more from Sacramento. As the Trump administration launches a federal lawsuit against California. Our next guest is a state lawmaker who has actually called on Washington to sue California. So tonight, he's actually getting his wish because President Trump's Justice Department has just done that. The lawsuit alleges 3 recently passed state laws are deliberately interfering with federal immigration policies. Joining me now, Republican candidate for governor here in California, Assemblyman Travis Allen. Great to have you with us tonight.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so this basically goes after 3 laws that were passed by California in the last year or so that have to deal with blocking or making it harder for ICE to do its immigration and enforcement in this area. The feds say it's no good. We'll see, because it's got to go through the circuit. It's going to have a rough road there.
It will, but, you know, this is not just about illegal immigration. This illegal sanctuary state is where California is sheltering people who are here illegally that are committing crimes while they're here in California with taxpayer dollars. It is absolutely illegal. It is completely unconstitutional. But it gets worse than that. Not only did the Democrats in California pass that law, just a few weeks ago, Javier Becerra, the criminal attorney general of California, was on record, and he said very directly, he said, if you are a California business owner and you try to comply with federal immigration law and actually help federal immigration officers who are doing their constitutional duty, he will prosecute you. And that's criminal obstruction of justice. Now, because he was not prosecuted by the Department of Justice, this has emboldened other Democrat politicians. As a matter of fact, Gavin Newsom, the lieutenant governor, has called on other Democrats in California to openly violate these laws. And Libby Schaaf, the mayor of Oakland, now, just recently, this was just a couple days ago, she warned everybody in her local area of an impending ICE raid. There was 800 criminals. They only ended up rounding up about 130. So what that means is that 600 criminals are now on the streets of California because Libby Schaaf was aiding and abetting criminals in California. Again, another felony. So now that Jeff Sessions is here in Sacramento, we're very happy because somebody has to stand up and keep California safe.
Somebody who's not happy. You're not surprised to hear this. Governor Brown, he says this: at a time of unprecedented political turmoil, Jeff Sessions has come to California to further divide and polarize America. Jeff, these political stunts may be the norm in Washington, but they don't work here. Sad. And I think there were 3 exclamation points.
Yeah, you know, look, Jerry Brown is wrong, and he knows he's wrong. He's violating the law. And all of the Democrat politicians that are running California know that they're in big trouble. With Jeff Sessions' arrival in Sacramento, justice is finally coming to California, and California citizens can sleep a little bit easier at night knowing that the U.S. Department of Justice is actually going to enforce federal immigration law.
Okay, you're not the only Republican running, so I want to give you a chance to respond to John Cox, who is also running. We're going to talk to him. He's going to be on the show later this week. But this is what he says about allegations that you've had to answer regarding sexual harassment. He says when you represent people, you can't engage in any behavior that would be considered risky in any way whatsoever, because what you're doing is you're opening yourself up to blackmail, you're opening yourself up to attacks and complaints that will affect your decision making. And so people know it was that the accusation was that your foot touched someone under a table and that you touched them on the shoulders.
This is exactly right. So, look, this is the standard playbook of the Democrats across the country. Anytime they're threatened by a Republican who's actually going to take on and then take out a Democrat, they throw out something like this. Now, the best they could find was 6 years ago, there was an 8-minute human resources meeting that we had with absolutely no action. And what they had said is someone said that you shook their hand too long, squeezed their shoulder, and tapped their foot under a table. You know, of course, at no time in the past nor at any time in the future have I ever done anything that was inappropriate. I'm sure I've shook many people's hands and probably, you know, accidentally bumped many people on their feet. But, you know, this is, again, another typical tactic we see from the Democrats.
But this is a Republican.
Well, actually, this was brought on, the charge was brought on by a Democrat-led committee right here in Sacramento. Okay. So John Cox, my opponent, is trailing badly in all of the polls. I'm the Republican frontrunner in the California governor's race. I lead in every single major poll, all 4 of which just came in the last month or so. And so really, with his desperate campaign, he's reaching out and trying to, you know, go onto a Democrat line of attack because he knows he's going to lose this race. Right. California needs a Republican to run to actually become the next governor.
We'll see if they get one, and we'll talk to him later this week as well. Great to see you. Great to meet you.
Thank you
so much. Have you with us live. More news right after this.
You bet.
An hour. Some say California is innovating its way right out of hiring human workers who do things like flip burgers. Restaurant chain here is now using a robot to take over that job. Let's check it out. Here to discuss, Richard Fowler, a radio host and Fox News contributor. Guy Benson, the political editor for townhall.com and Fox News contributor. And Ted Gaines, a Republican state senator here in California. Welcome to all of you.
Good to be here, Shannon.
All right, Senator, I'll start with you. Sure. Flippy the robot is now this robot that actually can measure the patties and flip them at just the right time. But that's a job that's now not going to be done by a human. What do you make of it?
That's right. So when we take a look at minimum wage, and that is $10.50 an hour right now in California, and it's going to go up by $1 an hour up through 2022. We're going to displace literally hundreds of thousands of employees in California. So when we look at the new technology, which we know is coming, we accelerate that in California by artificially raising wages.
Okay, so I want to look at a couple of different studies here. The American Action Forum has said 261,000 jobs could be lost in 2018 due to minimum wage hikes. University of Washington said when Seattle did this and pushed for the $13 minimum wage, that it actually cut hours and left workers with $125 less a month, Richard.
Well, here's what we know. Every time that we in this country have raised the minimum wage, we actually see our economy grow leaps and bounds. The last time the federal government raised the minimum wage was, I think, 2006, and we saw the economy grow right after that. So here's what and I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'd rather have a human flip my burger than a robot. I think they have, you know, they could just cook meat better. Just saying.
I don't know. They said that this thing actually has sensors, Guy, that can tell the perfect time to flip it over. Unlike most of us when we're doing this on the grill at home, don't always get it right. But the guy who's the co-founder of the company behind these said this: the technology is not about replacing jobs. We see Flippy as a third hand. So it's just supposed to help current employees. But we know a lot of fast food folks say that they're putting in kiosks, they're doing all kinds of things so that they're not charging us $50 for a hamburger.
Yep, automation is the future. That is a fact. I think these political efforts to artificially inflate by government fiat wages, as the representative said, hastens that process and that trend. And this is something that we have to deal with. That's not a political statement to make. This is the way that our economy is going to be radically disrupted over the next decade or two, and clinging to the past and marching for, you know, fight for 15, it might feel good, but it doesn't reflect reality.
So I want to push back on that a little bit.
Well,
and here's where I disagree with Guy, is that here's the thing. We know that when we raise minimum wage, we actually help families, right? We solve poverty.
No, we don't know that.
But it's true. When you raise the minimum wage in communities, you help families, you uplift the communities, you create new businesses, you create new innovations. And we also know...
Richard, if the end result is that there are fewer hours because employers say, we only have a certain amount of funds that we can use,
but herein lies a larger problem, right? It's over and over again. There's money given out to corporations at nauseum. We saw this tax cut give billions of dollars to corporations, and their response is, oh, but we don't have the money to pay workers.
No, they raised wages more than most of these leftist.
So if they've raised wages, then let's just have a
more to say, but
a
gentlemen, we got to leave it there for tonight. We got to leave it there for tonight. But before we go, we would like to thank Visit Sacramento, the California Railroad Authority, and the Sacramento Police Department for their professional, hardworking staff for helping us to put on this show right here tonight. Thank you so much to all of you. We'll see you tomorrow night from LA with the Attorney General.